So there's a purple yam taking over cafe menus right now. And I know how that sounds. Bear with me. It's called ube. It's been a cornerstone of Filipino cuisine for generations. And if you've been in any halfway trendy cafe in an Indian metro recently, there's a decent chance you've seen it. In a latte, in a cheesecake, in a drink that costs 400 rupees and looks like it was designed specifically to be photographed. Which honestly, it probably was. But here's the thing, and this is what got me curious enough to actually make an episode about a yam. Ube's rise isn't really about ube. The ingredient is almost beside the point. What's happening is something far more interesting. A playbook is being run, a very specific, very repeatable playbook. And once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. Welcome to Build to Brand. Strategy without jargon, culture without noise, branding explained like a systems problem. Let's get into it. Okay, quick note before we dive in. This is a shorter one. Think of it as a palate cleanser between the bigger episodes. Lighter, faster, but hopefully still something that sticks. Alright, back to the yam. To understand what's happening with ube, you have to look at what happened with matcha, because ube isn't a new idea. It's the next iteration of an idea that already worked extremely well. Cast your mind back to matcha's rise in the West, and more recently in India. Matcha had been sitting in Japanese tea culture for centuries. It was an obscure, it was an undiscovered, it was just not here yet. And then at some point in the last decade, it landed in specialty cafes, got put in a glass with some oat milk, got photographed approximately 40 million times, and suddenly it was everywhere. But why matcha, and why then? This is the part that's actually interesting. Matcha has something that very few ingredients have at the same time. A strong visual identity, a credible origin story, a health narrative, and a taste profile unfamiliar enough to feel premium. That combination is incredibly rare, and cafes figured out, some deliberately, some intuitively, that matcha wasn't just a flavor, it was a signal. Ordering a matcha latte said something about you. That's the real product, not the drink, the identity signal. And here's the structural mechanic underneath all of this. Scarcity plus aesthetics plus cultural narrative equals a pricing story. Cafes could charge significantly more for a matcha latte than a regular one, not because the ingredient cost justified it entirely, but because the perceived value did. Unfamiliar is a pricing strategy, as it turns out. So matcha ran its arc. Niche specialty cafe to Instagram darling to mainstream menu staple. And somewhere in that journey, it stopped being a signal. Once your neighborhood Starbucks equivalent has it, ordering matcha no longer says anything interesting about you. The identity value deflates, which creates a vacancy. And that vacancy is exactly where ube walks in. Look at what ube has. Purple, genuinely, almost unreasonably purple, so it photographs brilliantly. A specific cultural home in Filipino cuisine which gives it an origin story, a flavor that's sweet and earthy and slightly unfamiliar to most people encountering it for the first time. And crucially, it's not matcha, it's the next thing. And in the attention economy, being the next thing is most of the job. The cafes introducing it right now are doing exactly what the early matcha adopters did, positioning it as premium, keeping it limited, letting the visual content do the discovery work. The people ordering it are doing what early matcha drinkers did, signaling taste, signaling awareness, getting there before it becomes obvious. The ingredient changed, the architecture didn't. And this is the pattern that keeps repeating. not just in food, in fashion, in music, in tech. There's always a cycle. Distinctive thing with cultural roots gets picked up by premium early adopters, gets amplified by visual platforms, gets absorbed by the mainstream, loses its signal value, and gets replaced by the next distinctive thing with cultural roots. The specific thing rotates. The system stays constant. What's worth saying with is the cultural dimension here, because it's real and it's complicated. Ube carries Filipino identity. Matcha carries Japanese identity. These aren't just aesthetic choices. They are cultural inheritances being adopted, repackaged, and monetized in contexts far from their origins. That's a transaction that deserves attention, even if we don't resolve it neatly. The trend machine doesn't pause for that conversation, but maybe we should. Alright, that's the episode. A purple yam, a Japanese tea, and a system that keeps running the same play with different ingredients. The question worth asking next time you see an unfamiliar ingredient on a menu with a price tag that makes you blink is, am I buying the thing or am I buying what the thing means? Usually it's the second one, which is fine, just worth knowing. If you enjoyed this one, even the shorter ones take more work than they look. Research, structure, writing, rewriting, then pretending it sounds effortless. If built to brand is something you want to keep hearing, the single best thing you can do is follow the show wherever you're listening. It genuinely helps. And if someone in your life would appreciate a podcast that explains the why, send it to them. Word of mouth is still the oldest marketing playbook, and honestly, still the best one. Built to brand. See you in the next one.